A police officer kicked a girl down the stairs, and he had no idea who he had just made his enemy. Her father tried to protect her, but the system decided to crush them both. What happens when a legend stands against corrupted power? Who will win? The law or the truth? Don't miss this story. Subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Support justice. Chuck Norris had driven through countless cities in his lifetime, but this one felt different. The skyline rose like jagged steel mountains, disappearing into a low-gray haze that made it seem as though the city itself was holding its breath. The car crept forward in the nearly frozen traffic, horns blaring all around them like irritated birds. Chuck kept one steady hand on the steering wheel while his daughter, Lily, watched the world beyond the window with a mixture of excitement and unease. She was only 16, but determination burned in her dark eyes like a torch. Her brown hair was tied tightly into a high ponytail, a style she always used for training, as if being prepared meant staying strong. Tomorrow would be her first major martial arts competition, something she had trained for over a year to reach. It was a moment she hoped would show not just the world, but her father as well, that she wasn't only known because of him, not just Chuck Norris' kid. She wanted to prove that her strength came from within. "Are you nervous?" Chuck asked, glancing toward her with a gentle smile. His voice held the calm authority of a man accustomed to handling storms without flinching. Lily shrugged, but the movement wasn't convincing. "A little. I don't want people whispering that I only got here because of you." Chuck breathed out slowly. "People will talk. They always do. What matters is that you know why you're here." He tapped the steering wheel with his thumb. "You earned your place. Every bruise, every early morning, every drop of sweat, that's all you." Lily smiled faintly, comforted but still tense. "Thanks, Dad." He gave her an approving nod. "But if anyone tries to mess with you, I'll roundhouse kick them into the next time zone." She laughed, a real laugh, and that eased the knot of anxiety in her chest. That was the balance between them. He took the edge off when the world felt too sharp. The traffic ahead finally loosened, giving Chuck room to advance. But relief lasted only seconds before a red sports car swerved aggressively in front of them, cutting him off so sharply the tires screeched in protest. Lily braced herself against the dashboard while Chuck brought the car under control. The driver of the red car stuck his head out the window and shouted something vulgar, waving his hand like he had won some kind of battle. Chuck held his calm, easing his foot off the brake and continuing as if nothing had happened. "Wow," Lily muttered, watching the car disappear into the distance. "People really are different here." Chuck chuckled softly. "Cities have a way of making some folks forget they're human." Lily pressed her forehead against the cool window glass. People rushed along sidewalks, faces buried in phones or lost deep in their own irritated thoughts. A cyclist yelled at a pedestrian. A bus driver leaned on his horn despite no one being in his way. Everything felt fast, loud, and angry. Chuck finally turned down a narrower street, where their hotel stood near a tall, shining arena where tomorrow's competition would take place. He found a parking space near the entrance and shut off the engine. Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They stepped out into a harsh gust of wind that carried an unpleasant mix of gasoline fumes, street food, and the distant scent of sewage. Lily grimaced, hugging her jacket closer. "Welcome to the big city," Chuck said dryly. They began walking toward the entrance of the hotel. As they passed the staircase leading down into a subway underpass, Lily slowed abruptly. Her gaze had caught something a man seated near the railings. His back hunched, his clothes worn thin. His hair was patchy and gray. On his chest, pinned with surprising care, were military service medals. He looked up as Lily paused a few steps away. His eyes were tired, exhausted even, but they held a gentleness that didn't match the rough shape he was in. He offered her a fragile, polite smile, as though afraid a less careful one might break. Chuck recognized the medals, awards earned by men who had stood in places most would never dare to go. Suddenly, the noise of the city faded into the background. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the bottle of water she hadn't finished during the drive. "Here," she said quietly. "You look thirsty." The man hesitated before taking it, as if ashamed to need help. "Thank you, miss," he murmured, the rasp in his voice hinting at years of hardship. "You're very kind." "You served, didn't you?" Lily asked, noticing the medals up close now. He nodded slowly. Once upon a time, people used to care about that. Not anymore. Now I'm just in the way. Chuck's eyes darkened with sympathy, but he stayed slightly back, letting Lily have this moment. He knew how important kindness was to her, perhaps more important than strength. Before he could step forward, a harsh voice cut through the air like a blade. "What did I tell you, old man?" A police officer, uniform crisp and spotless, marched toward them. His boots struck the pavement with an authority he seemed eager to showcase. His name tag read, Miller. The way he looked at the homeless veteran held no respect, only irritation, like the man was a stain he couldn't scrub off the street. I wasn't doing anything," the veteran stammered, clutching the medals on his chest protectively. "You're loitering," Officer Miller snapped. "You're scaring decent people. How many times do we have to go over this?" "I'm not scaring anyone," the man whispered, shrinking into himself. Lily stepped forward. "He's not bothering anybody. Why are you yelling at him?" Miller turned, surprised to be challenged. His eyes scanned Lily and then Chuck before returning to the girl like a predator, deciding how to react to an unexpected sound. "Oh, really?" Miller sneered. "So now little teenagers get to teach me how to do my job." Lily stood her ground, though she felt the heat rising in her chest. "Just show some respect. He served our country." "Yeah? And look where it got him." Miller stepped closer and kicked the man's backpack several inches away. "He should do himself and everyone else a favor and disappear." Lily gasped in anger as the veteran fumbled to retrieve his bag. "That's enough," she shouted. Chuck finally spoke, his voice calm but edged like steel. "Officer, we don't want any trouble. Just let the man be." Miller glanced at Chuck, really looked, and for a moment his expression flickered. Recognition? Intimidation? But just as quickly he smothered it with arrogance. "You two tourists?" he asked, squaring up as if to make himself taller. "We're here for a competition," Chuck said plainly. "We'll be gone tomorrow. Then I suggest you mind your own business while you're here." Miller's tone dripped with venom. Lily's hands clenched into fists. She wasn't sure whether it was fear or anger guiding her now, but she refused to look away. Miller's eyes narrowed, clearly memorizing her face. "You don't know how things work in this city," he warned with a dangerous smirk. "People who stick their noses where they don't belong tend to regret it." Chuck placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder, signaling her to breathe. Still, his own jaw tightened. Miller turned, not without first giving the homeless man one last cruel shove with his boot before walking off. The veteran whispered a shaky thank you, but Lily's heart was pounding too fast to answer right away. Chuck helped him gather his belongings and made sure he was steady before they stepped away. As they climbed the stairs toward the hotel doors, Lily spoke quietly. Why did he do that? He didn't even know the guy. Chuck looked up at the towering buildings around them, as though the answer was hidden somewhere in their cold windows. "Some people forget what real strength looks like," he said. "It's easier for them to push others down than to lift them up." Lily hugged herself, not because of the cold wind this time. For the first time since they arrived, she felt the weight of the city pushing back. Chuck noticed her silence and softened his tone. "You did good standing up for him," he said. "Your mother would have been proud." Lily's eyes flicked toward him, surprised by the rare mention of her late mother. Something warm bloomed inside her chest, even as the world around them seemed chilly and dark. But when she glanced back toward the staircase, she saw Officer Miller had not disappeared entirely. He lingered at the bottom of the steps, watching them. The way his jaw flexed, the way his hand rested just a little too tightly on his belt. It was clear the earlier altercation wasn't over in his mind. Lily shivered despite herself. Chuck's hand squeezed her shoulder once more before guiding her through the hotel doors. The lobby was a sudden contrast, bright, warm, safe. But as they checked in and headed toward the elevator, the unease refused to disappear. Tomorrow was supposed to be the biggest day of her life. Tonight, however, the city had shown its teeth, and Lily had the unsettling feeling that Officer Miller was not done with them. Not at all. When they reached their room, Chuck double-locked the door and drew back the curtains only halfway. He tried to relax, but some instinct wouldn't let him. Something in the back of his mind whispered that the conflict earlier had lit a fuse neither of them could see. Lily sat quietly on her bed, gripping her knees to her chest. She wanted to believe her father's strength was enough to keep them safe, that doing the right thing always worked out in the end. But outside, somewhere down those stairs near the subway entrance, was a man in uniform who now held a personal grudge, a man with power, a man who had noticed her, and a man who believed she needed to be taught a lesson. Chuck turned off the lamp. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow is your day." Lily nodded, lying down and closing her eyes. But long after the room fell silent, she remained wide awake. The image of Officer Miller's cold stare burned into her thoughts. The city did not sleep outside. Car horns, sirens, and distant shouting seeped through the windows like reminders that danger here was only ever one wrong look away. Tonight, the storm had only begun to gather, and the Norris family was now caught right in its path. The night settled over the city like a heavy blanket, but it did nothing to quiet its restless pulse. The sounds of traffic, echoing steps in the hallways, the distant whine of sirens, all of it formed a constant hum beneath the thin hotel walls. Lily lay awake in her bed long after Chuck's calm breathing signaled that he had fallen asleep. The events of the day replayed in her mind like a clipped film reel, a veteran's tired eyes, a cruel boot, and that officer's frozen smirk that promised trouble. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the fear to vanish. Tomorrow should have been a day of pride, a day she'd been building toward for months. She couldn't let some angry cop steal that from her. She forced herself to inhale deeply, repeating the breathing exercises Chuck had taught her when she was little, a way to silence the world when it became too loud. Slowly, sleep began to tug at her, and she drifted into a light, uneasy rest. But sometime later, a single small thing shattered the calm, a dry throat and a painfully empty water bottle. Lily blinked awake and sat up, rubbing her face. Her mouth felt like cotton. She checked the small fridge, the bathroom cup, even the gym bag she had packed earlier. Nothing. Chuck had been right. She always forgot to refill things. She listened carefully. Her father still slept, the slow rise and fall of his chest visible in the dim hotel light. She knew she should wake him, should tell him she wanted to run downstairs to buy something to drink. But stubbornness tugged at her pride. She could handle a solo trip to the store. It was just across the street. She wasn't a child anymore. Tiptoeing across the carpet, Lily slipped on a hoodie over her pajamas and eased quietly into her sneakers. She picked up her wallet and phone from the table and looked back at her father one last time. His brow was furrowed even in sleep, his subconscious refusing to let go of the earlier tension. She didn't want to worry him. She slipped silently into the hallway and let the door close behind her. The corridor was dim and still, illuminated only by soft wall lights. Lily pressed the elevator button and crossed her arms to ward off the chill in the air conditioning. When the bell chimed and the doors slid open, she stepped in and pressed the lobby floor. As the elevator descended, she tried to shake off the nervous prickling at the back of her neck. She wasn't afraid, just alert. That's what Chuck would say. The lobby had settled into a quieter state. A lone desk clerk scrolled on his phone. Soft music played from unseen speakers. The glass doors parted smoothly as Lily stepped out into the cool night. A breeze cut across her exposed legs beneath the hoodie, urging her forward. She spotted the small convenience store across the street, its fluorescent lights bright against the surrounding concrete. But to reach it, she'd have to take the same underpass stairs they had walked past earlier, the shortcut most pedestrians use to avoid the speeding cars at street level. The staircase yawned downward into the shadows, the flickering overhead lights casting slippery shapes along the walls. Lily took a breath, then started down. Each footstep echoed as she descended, the air turning cooler, the world above becoming muffled. She was halfway down when she heard the voice. "Well, look who decided to take a midnight stroll." The blood in her veins turned to ice. She froze in place and turned her head slowly. Officer Miller stood at the top of the stairs, hands casually hooked on his belt, as though he'd been waiting for her. His silhouette blocked the glow from the street lamps behind him, casting his face in partial shadow. Lily's heart thudded painfully. "I don't want any trouble," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Miller began his descent, each measured step deliberate. "Funny. Earlier, you seemed eager to start some." His tone oozed sarcasm, wrapped in a calm cruelty. Lily took another step downward, instinctively increasing the distance between them. Her heartbeat drowned out the city noise. "You shouldn't be wandering alone at night," he continued. "This city isn't safe. People get hurt down here." The implication was sharper than any blade. Lily swallowed hard. "I'm just going to the store. Please leave me alone." He chuckled, low and mocking. "See, that's the thing. You made me look bad today, in front of people." He paused, eyes glinting. "I don't like being disrespected." "I didn't disrespect you," Lily insisted. "I just asked you not to hurt that man." His expression twisted, as though the very reminder had scratched an open wound. "You think you know what's best for this city? For me?" He stepped closer. Too close. Lily backed down another step, nearly stumbling. "Please, stop." "What's the matter?" he taunted. "Your big, tough daddy not here to protect you?" She felt anger push through the fear. "You're a police officer. You should act like one." For a second, the air itself seemed to freeze. Her words hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Miller leaned slightly forward, his voice dropping into a low growl. "You should really learn when to shut up." Before Lily could react, he shoved her or kicked out just enough to catch her off balance. Her foot slipped on the cold concrete edge of a step. Gravity yanked her downward. Her arms flailed as the world spun. She hit the stairs hard, pain jolting through her back and elbows. Her phone flew from her hand and clattered against the railing, sliding out of reach. She tumbled a few more steps, coming to a harsh stop against the landing below. The breath was knocked out of her. Darkness clouded her vision. A sharp pain flared along her spine. She tried to push herself up, gasping, but the shock made her limbs clumsy. Above her, Miller's boots thudded slowly downwards. "Look at you now," he said, voice dripping contempt. "Not so brave when Daddy isn't around." Lily forced herself to move, gripping the railing with trembling fingers. She felt tears threaten, not from the pain alone, but from the humiliation and the chilling knowledge that she was alone with a man who saw her as nothing more than a target. "You stay away from me," she rasped. He reached the bottom of the stairs and crouched slightly, looming over her. "Or what? You'll cry for help?" He motioned mockingly around the quiet, deserted tunnel. "Nobody's coming." But someone was. Up at the street level, Chuck had awakened with a jolt. A father's intuition didn't need logic. It just screamed. He checked the clock. Lily had been gone too long, too quietly, too suddenly. He threw on his jacket and headed downstairs, his steps brisk and sure. He followed the same path Lily had taken, spotting the underpass stairs immediately. As he approached, faint voices drifted upward, one trembling, the other dripping with threat. Then he heard the thud of a fall that made his pulse spike with dread. His pace transformed into a sprint. Back in the tunnel, Miller reached toward Lily's shoulder as if to yank her upright for another round of intimidation. But then his eyes shifted upward and he suddenly stood straighter. Because Chuck Norris was descending the stairs like a storm given human shape. "Dad!" Lily's voice cracked with relief and fear. Chuck reached her side in an instant, placing himself between his daughter and the officer. His stance was calm, centered, but every muscle in his body coiled with silent fury. His eyes locked with Miller's. "What did you do to my daughter?" he asked quietly. Miller opened his mouth, but whatever excuse he intended fell apart beneath the weight of Chuck's stare. He took a half step back as though instinct sensed danger, even if the mind hadn't yet processed it. "She slipped," he spat out, but his voice lacked conviction now. "These stairs are dangerous." Chuck didn't move, didn't blink. "Stay where you are." Miller, rattled, attempted to grab Chuck's arm as if asserting dominance would somehow restore control. But before he even completed the motion, Chuck's hand shot up like lightning. He redirected the officer's wrist, twisted, and swept him off balance. Miller stumbled backward, a gasp ripped from his throat as his body slammed against the wall. In one smooth follow-through, Chuck positioned himself so Miller's arm was trapped, bent in a way that made any further aggression impossible. "This ends now," Chuck said, voice rumbling like distant thunder. Lily watched through teary eyes, clutching her aching elbow, relief flooding her, drowning the pain. As if on cue, a police siren wailed somewhere above. Seconds later, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Two uniformed officers rushed in, weapons drawn, and yelled for Chuck to get on the ground. "Let go of him," one shouted. Chuck carefully released Miller and raised his hands to show he wasn't resisting, but the officers grabbed him with unnecessary force all the same. One twisted his arms behind his back and snapped cold steel cuffs around his wrists. Lily scrambled forward. "He didn't do anything. He was protecting me." Miller straightened his uniform, shame turning quickly into vindictive rage. "Arrest him for assaulting a police officer," he barked, "and detain the girl. She'll be charged for interfering with a police investigation." "That's a lie," Lily shouted, heart hammering. "You pushed me." One of the other officers hesitated, glancing at the trembling teenager and the bruises already beginning to show on her arms. But rank and loyalty to their own held more sway than truth. Miller stepped closer to Chuck, adjusting his badge with a bitter smirk. "Looks like you're not so tough when you're the one in cuffs." Chuck met his eyes unflinching. The rage was still there, simmering beneath a surface held in check by sheer will. "Hurting a child makes you brave?" he asked softly. "That's not strength, it's cowardice." Miller's smirk faltered for a heartbeat before returning, uglier than before. "Keep talking," he hissed. "Where you're going, nobody cares." Chuck's jaw locked. Lily cried out his name as he was pulled toward the waiting patrol car. The night wind howled through the tunnel, stirring Lily's fallen phone and sending it skittering across the concrete like a discarded truth no one wanted to see. As Chuck was pushed into the back seat, he caught Lily's gaze. Her eyes glistened with both terror and defiance. He gave her a single steady nod and unspoken promise. "I'm here. I won't let them do this. We'll get through it." But as the doors slammed shut and the patrol car pulled away with him inside, Lily remained alone on the sidewalk under the unforgiving city lights. Pain pulsing through her body and betrayal throbbing in her heart. The city had shown its cruelty earlier. Tonight it had shown its power. And neither Chuck nor Lily could yet see how much darker things would become before the dawn. Cold metal cuffed against his wrists. Chuck Norris sat rigid in the back seat of the police car as the engine rumbled beneath him, the city lights smearing past the windows in bright streaks. The officers in the front spoke low to each other, but he didn't listen. His thoughts were trapped elsewhere. Every breath he took was measured. Every heartbeat felt like another second stolen from being by his daughter's side. Lily, injured, frightened, alone. The image of her falling down those steps, a helpless blur of motion and pain, stabbed through him again like a slow knife. He forced his mind to stillness. Panic would do nothing. He needed clarity. He needed to get back to her. The patrol car swung into a gated parking area beside a squat brick building that looked more like a factory than a police precinct. Chuck was pulled from the vehicle and marched through steel doors into a harsh hallway that smelled of sweat, old coffee, and dried ink. The lights flickered slightly as if the place itself were worn down by years of bad decisions. They stripped him of his belongings, inventoried everything from his wallet to his watch. A young officer tried not to stare at him too long, but he couldn't help sneaking glances, the disbelief written across his face. Chuck Norris, arrested. It felt absurd. It felt wrong, but the cuffs digging into his skin were real enough. They placed him in a small interrogation room. The walls were bare concrete, and a metal table flanked by 2 chairs sat beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. A camera blinked red in the corner. Chuck sat, hands cuffed to a loop in the table, his expression unreadable. His eyes, however, burned like coals. Minutes passed without movement. Then the door clicked open. Officer Miller walked in, arms folded, posture overly confident, as if the bruises on his pride were now bandaged by these cold walls and forced authority. His smile was thin and predatory. "You're in a lot of trouble," he said casually, pulling out the opposite chair with a screech. He sat and leaned forward. "Attacking an officer, not a smart move." Chuck stared at him, unflinching. "I defended my daughter." "She assaulted me," Miller snapped. Chuck's silence was more cutting than any retort. Miller's lips curled into something more venomous. "You think being some washed-up action hero changes anything in here? Nobody's scared of your movie tricks. If you had done your job with decency, I wouldn't have had to interfere," Chuck replied, voice low and steady. "You pushed a minor down a flight of stairs. That's all that matters." Miller's nostrils flared. He abruptly stood and slammed his palm onto the table. You did this to yourself. And if that brat of yours keeps running her mouth, she'll regret ever stepping foot in this city. Chuck's eyes darkened. His breathing slowed. His muscles coiled. The officer felt it, a shift in the room, the air tightening around them like a noose. For a heartbeat, Miller took a step back. The door opened again, breaking the deadly silence. A different officer entered, holding a file. Miller, commanding officer, wants you, now. Miller straightened, his composure returning. We're not finished, he hissed to Chuck before leaving the room. As the door shut, the new officer glanced at Chuck. There was hesitation in his gaze, even a hint of sympathy. He looked young, too young to already seem so defeated by the job. Just wait here, he muttered before walking out and locking the door behind him. Chuck leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes for a moment, not to rest but to sharpen. He listened to the muted chaos outside the room, phones ringing, boots dragging against tile, short bursts of impatience. In the distance, he swore he heard a muffled cry, a voice too familiar. Lily. Across the building, Lily sat on a cold bench outside another room, her arms wrapped around herself. A blanket had been thrown over her shoulders by a disinterested officer, but it didn't stop the trembling. Her elbow throbbed, her back ached, and her heart felt like it would pound its way out of her chest. She had begged to see her father, but they had brushed her off, saying she needed to cooperate. The world felt huge and cruel and indifferent. A woman in a suit-sharp glasses, even sharper tone, approached her with a clipboard. Lily Norris, I'm Detective Smith. We need your statement. Lily swallowed hard. He didn't do anything wrong. My dad only protected me. The detective's expression remained stiff, professional, but her eyes hinted at skepticism or something rehearsed. According to Officer Miller, you physically interfered with him while he was performing his duties, and then your father assaulted him. That's a lie, Lily snapped, fear cracking into anger. He pushed me. I fell. Officer Miller's report states that you lost your balance and that you struck him first. Smith's tone didn't falter. She was reading a script of lies, penned by someone who now stood on firmer ground thanks to a badge. Lily's hands clenched tighter around herself. Her voice broke. Why won't any of you listen to me? The detective sighed and leaned closer. Look, if you just admit that you and your father acted out of fear or confusion, we can resolve this quietly. No court, no charges. You can still go to your tournament tomorrow. The offer was bait, a trap dressed as mercy. Lily shook her head. Tears stung her eyes and she wiped them angrily. I won't lie. I won't let you get away with this. For the first time, something flickered in Detective Smith's eyes. Annoyance, maybe even regret, but she straightened and scribbled on her clipboard. Then I'm afraid things will get more complicated. She turned away, leaving Lily alone again. The seconds crawled. Every sound felt amplified, every footstep in the hallway a threat. She could barely breathe through the frustration and fear. She looked down and noticed dried blood on her scraped elbow. Her hands trembled as she tried to rub it away, but it only smeared. Her eyes blurred again. Then the door to the building's entrance opened. A familiar figure hurried in, his clothes worn, his beard untrimmed, but his posture unmistakably military despite everything life had taken from him. The homeless veteran Frank. He spotted Lily and limped toward her. Miss, I saw them take your father. I came as soon as I could. Lily blinked in surprise, relief flooding her features. You saw what happened? Frank nodded, his voice haggard but steady. Yes. I was following at a distance. Thought maybe I could help if things went bad. He glanced at the officers lingering nearby. Didn't do a good job of that. You're here now, Lily whispered, her voice shaking. Frank knelt to look her in the eyes. I'll tell them what I saw. I'll tell them exactly what that officer did. Before Lily could thank him, a sergeant stormed over. You can't be in here, out. Frank stood firm despite the stiffness in his legs. I'm a witness. I need to… You're trespassing, the sergeant interrupted. We don't need your input. Get out before I make you. Lily jumped to her feet. He's telling the truth. Why won't you let him speak? Enough, the sergeant snapped. He grabbed Frank by the arm and began dragging him toward the door. Hey! Lily cried out, rushing after them. Frank didn't resist much. He couldn't. He gave Lily a small, grim smile over his shoulder. "Don't give up," he whispered before the door slammed behind him. Lily stared at the closed entrance, fists trembling. Two good people had tried to stand up for what was right, but the system smothered honesty just as easily as it protected the guilty. The fear inside her twisted into something else, something bright and hot. Rage. Meanwhile, back in the interrogation room, the door opened again. A different high-ranking officer strode in this time, flipping open a thick file. His eyes barely spared Chuck a glance as he spoke. "You've put yourself in a very difficult position, Mr. Norris," he said. "Assaulting an officer carries serious consequences. If you deny responsibility, we will pursue full charges. Jail time is almost certain." Chuck's voice didn't waver. "You're covering for him." The officer snapped the file closed. "I suggest you think of your daughter. If you cooperate and admit guilt, maybe the prosecutor will take pity on her too. She could be charged as well." Chuck's jaw locked, the veins in his neck tightening. "Don't you dare threaten her." "Then be smart," the officer said coldly. "Sign the statement. Accept responsibility. We all go home. No scandals, no noise." The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to inch closer, crushing the space around him. Chuck looked down at the paper shoved his way, a humiliating fabrication, a lie. His eyes narrowed. "I will not sign away the truth," he said. The officer studied him for a moment. "So be it. First thing tomorrow morning, charges will be filed. You'll be transferred to county jail." He stood and walked out without another word. Chuck sat alone in the silence that followed. His fists tightened involuntarily, the metal cuffs groaning under the strain. The system was a beast, and they had stepped into its jaws. But beasts could be brought down if you knew where to strike. He lifted his gaze to the camera in the corner of the room. Wherever Lily was, he hoped she could feel the promise burning inside him. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, steady, controlled. Worry could not be allowed to take root. Fear had no place inside him. Lily needed him strong. Lily needed him free. But as the hours slipped by, the weight of the city pressed down harder, twisting justice into something unrecognizable. When morning crept close, Chuck remained trapped behind concrete and steel, and Lily, sitting on a cold bench with her injuries throbbing, silently vowed the same thing. They would not break. She would make them listen. Somehow, some way, she would drag the truth into the light. The storm had swallowed them whole. Now it was time to fight their way back out. Morning didn't bring relief. The sun climbed reluctantly into the sky, weighed down by the same heaviness that pressed onto every heartbeat in the precinct. The fluorescent lights made Chuck's eyes ache as they dragged him from the interrogation room and toward a holding cell to await the official charges. His hands were uncuffed only so they could replace the metal with another set attached to a bench along the wall. Every click of the lock echoed like a countdown. No matter how steady he tried to remain, each passing minute gnawed at him with the same silent question. Where is Lily now? Was she safe? Was she still terrified? He breathed through the dread like he would through a fight, slow, controlled, unwavering. He needed to be sharp the moment the opportunity to stand came. On the other side of the building, Lily stood before a mirror in the women's restroom. The harsh lighting revealed more than she wanted to see: scraped knees, a fresh bruise already darkening along her forearm, and faint swelling on her cheek where she had hit the stairwell floor. She splashed cold water on her face, wincing at the sting when it met the abrasions. She had cried earlier, but no tears came now. Something far stronger had taken their place. She dried her hands and stepped into the hallway just in time to hear Ray's voices further down. Instinctively, she followed the sound, heart pounding. When she turned the corner, she saw Frank, the veteran, being shoved toward the door again, this time by two officers. "I'm telling you, I saw it," Frank insisted, his voice cracking but fierce. "That man saved his daughter. You're protecting a thug in a uniform. Keep talking and you'll go to jail too," one officer snarled, pushing him harder. Lily rushed forward. "Leave him alone." Frank steadied himself, shooting her a grateful glance. But the officers only looked annoyed. "You again," the taller one scoffed. "You should be thankful we're not charging you with resisting." "That officer pushed me," Lily said, her voice rising with each word. I could have broken my neck. You can't keep ignoring the truth. The shorter officer smirked, leaning close enough for her to smell stale coffee on his breath. Truth is what we write in our reports. Understand? Before Lily could respond, a firm voice intervened from behind her. Let him speak. All of them turned. It was a captain older, silver streaks in his hair, a chest decorated with commendations. His eyes moved between Lily and Frank analytically. He signaled the officers to stop. We will take a statement from him, the captain said, and the girl first. The officers exchanged confused looks but obeyed, leading Frank away reluctantly. Lily turned to thank the captain, but his gaze was different now, calculating, almost guarded. You're the girl from last night, he said calmly. Yes, she replied, trying to stand straighter. Officer Miller claims you interfered with lawful police conduct, he continued. His tone carried no obvious accusation, but every word was chosen precisely, revealing nothing and everything at once. He hurt a homeless veteran for no reason, Lily argued. He called him garbage. Then he pushed me. My father just protected me. The captain regarded her injuries, his expression unreadable. And you have proof of this? Lily froze. Her phone. Where was it? She had lost it in the fall. She shook her head slowly. No physical evidence. Just your word, he concluded. That should be enough, Lily whispered, though not even she was sure she believed that now. The captain sighed in a way that suggested frustration rather than disbelief. Wait here. He turned and walked away. Minutes passed. Lily remained rooted to the spot, knees shaking. Finally, the captain reappeared with an expression that was different, troubled. Your father is being released temporarily, he said. But be warned, Miller's report is strong, and internal affairs will still review the matter. Lily's heart leapt. Released! Can I see him? The captain nodded once. Follow me. They walked through stone corridors that twisted like a maze until they reached a heavy door. When it opened, Lily found Chuck standing beside an officer, rubbing his stiff wrists. His eyes immediately found hers. Lily! Her name felt like a breath he'd been holding for hours. She rushed to hug him carefully, mindful of her sore body. Are you okay? He asked, his hands framing her face, searching for injuries. I'm fine now, she said, though the ache behind her words betrayed the truth. Chuck turned toward the captain. Thank you, he said simply. But the captain's expression held caution more than kindness. This doesn't mean you're cleared, he warned. Lie low, don't cause trouble. Chuck nodded once. We will. He and Lily stepped out into the sunlight, both squinting as if daylight were a stranger now. They crossed the street toward the hotel, but before they could enter, Frank appeared from behind a lamppost, out of breath. Thank God, he rasped. They let you out. I should thank you, Chuck said. You tried to help when no one else would. Frank waved the gratitude away, embarrassed. They didn't want my statement. Threw me out twice. Chuck's jaw tightened. Of course they did. I figured I'd wait, Frank said. Make sure you weren't sent off in a van somewhere. Lily managed a weak smile. Thank you for not giving up on us. Frank's eyes flicked nervously around the street. I know that cop, he said quietly. Known him a long time. He's tied to some very bad people. What kind of people? Chuck asked, his voice low. Frank swallowed. Organized criminals. He runs errands for them or looks the other way for cash. Drugs, smuggling, protection rackets. Heard rumors about even worse. He scratched his beard. Miller's been deep in it for years. The department gets benefits for ignoring certain things. Lily's stomach twisted. So pushing a homeless veteran, that wasn't just cruelty. It was to keep him silent. Frank nodded grimly. I used to be a detective before I tried to expose the wrong men. They buried me under lies and threw me out like trash. Chuck's eyes darkened as the puzzle pieces slid together. The hostility, the cover-ups, the eagerness to twist the narrative. This wasn't about a fall on some stairs. It was about power. Frank hesitated before continuing. There's something else. Yesterday, when your girl stood up for me, Miller was on his way to pick up something. A package, a drop-off from one of his contacts. She interrupted the handoff. And these guys don't like mistakes. So now he wants revenge, Chuck said, voice like stone. Frank nodded. and to make sure she can't testify against him. Lily glanced between them, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. What do we do? Chuck looked at his daughter, her bruised arms, her resilient eyes, and felt pride fuse with protectiveness. We fight back, but we do it smart. Frank nodded approvingly. I still have some contacts who aren't corrupt. A few old friends. I can find out where Miller meets his people. If we can gather proof, real proof, maybe Internal Affairs won't be able to bury it this time. We'll help, Lily said immediately. Chuck turned to her. You should rest. You need your strength for tomorrow. She met his gaze fiercely. That tournament isn't my only fight anymore. Silence stretched between them before Chuck nodded. All right, we do this together. They spent the next several hours planning. Frank scribbled notes on a scrap of paper, locations, names, times where suspicious activity had been seen. Chuck listened intently, asking precise questions like a soldier planning a covert operation. Lily insisted on recording everything in a new notebook she bought at a nearby convenience store, since her phone was gone. As night fell again, the city's hunger returned. Cars hissed past like predators on the hunt, and the neon glow cast long, predatory shadows. Frank led them to a rooftop overlooking a rundown parking lot on the outskirts of the city, one of Miller's known meeting points. From behind a ventilation unit, they watched as a black SUV rolled in. Two men stepped out, one in plain clothes, bulky with muscle under his jacket. The other was Miller. He looked around carefully before taking a small black case from the passenger seat. It was exchanged quickly for an envelope thick enough to choke a mailbox. Miller tucked it into his jacket. Lily quietly lifted her borrowed camera and zoomed in, capturing photos and a short video. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself. She was learning a new kind of battlefield, one fought with truth instead of fists. Chuck kept one eye on her while tracking every movement below. Frank whispered names, identifying players with quiet fury. That's the boss's nephew. That case? Guns, probably. When the exchange ended and the SUV rolled away, Chuck let out the breath he'd been holding. That's one. We'll need more, Frank said. Much more. Lily lowered the camera, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. We'll get more. As they walked back through the sleeping city, Chuck kept his arm around Lily's shoulders. She leaned into him, sore but unbroken. Frank trailed beside them, limping slightly, determination brightening his tired steps. They had faced the system's cruelty, its lies, its corruption. Now they had something else, a target, a plan, and a reason no court or badge could silence. As they disappeared into the hotel lobby, the city lights flickered like nervous eyes aware that for the first time, the hunted were beginning to hunt back. Morning arrived, but peace did not come with it. A pale sun climbed above the skyline, filtering weak light through the hotel curtains and landing on Lily's bruised face as she sat on the edge of her bed, lacing her shoes with hands that still trembled faintly from the night before. She tried to move carefully. Her back protested every bend and twist, and her elbow throbbed with a steady pulse. But she refused to limp. She refused to let pain dictate anything today. Today was supposed to be her day, the day she proved herself in the arena. Now it also carried a heavier meaning: honor, truth, and justice. Chuck stood behind her, fastening his watch. Though he looked composed, Lily could sense the tension lurking beneath his calm exterior. It was there in the way he kept glancing toward the window, as if expecting danger to be perched on the other side of the glass. He had barely slept. Every hour had been spent planning, thinking, watching over her. Frank sat by the small table with a steaming cup of cheap hotel coffee, spreading out the grainy photos they had taken last night on the rooftop. The images weren't perfect, a bit blurry, some too dark, but the figures were identifiable. Miller clearly exchanging a case for money, evidence that could break the lies holding him above consequence. The problem was simple. Evidence was useless if the wrong people controlled the truth. We have to be smart, Frank muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. If we hand these photos over directly, Miller's friends will bury them before anyone sees them. So we go public, Lily suggested. Internet, social media. Someone will notice. Maybe, Chuck said thoughtfully, but rumors are easily doubted. They could claim it's edited, staged, anything. We need undeniable proof, more recordings, more witnesses. We must show the pattern, not just one instance. Frank nodded slowly. He's got a meetup today, late morning, same place. They move product before lunch rush, so it blends with business traffic. Chuck turned to Lily. We'll go there before your competition. We'll get what we need. She swallowed and lifted her chin. I can handle it. Chuck studied her carefully, reading her spirit and her pain. But you must focus on your fight too. Not with them, with the opponent waiting for you in that ring. You earned that moment. I know, she said. Her voice held strength, even if her body was struggling to keep up. Chuck put a hand on her shoulder. If you ever feel unsafe, I'll say something. I promise, she finished for him. A small smile formed on his lips. She was becoming too much like him. They gathered their items, the camera, the notebook, a fresh memory card, and stepped out of the hotel, the city air thick and chilly. The morning crowd surged around them, 1,000 lives moving fast, unaware of the war being waged in the quiet shadows just behind them. Frank guided them back to the rooftop vantage point above the parking lot from the night before. This time the sun made visibility clearer. They crouched low behind the ventilation units, careful not to silhouette themselves against the horizon. Minutes felt like small eternities. Lily clutched the camera close, her eyes scanning the lot below. A sudden engine growl signaled their moment. The same black SUV rolled in, accompanied by a dark sedan this time. Out stepped the bulky man from last night and Miller once again. Lily steadied her camera, zooming in to catch every possible detail. Chuck watched the angles, ready to shift position if needed. Frank murmured quiet identifications under his breath, cataloging the faces. Miller looked jumpier today, his head jerked side to side, paranoia chipping away at his confidence. Either he sensed eyes on him, or his guilt had begun to whisper truths he didn't want to hear. This time the exchange was larger two cases. Miller checked the content briefly before nodding. The man from the sedan shoved an envelope into his pocket, and Miller tucked the money deeper beneath his jacket. The camera clicked rapidly in Lily's hands. Proof. Real proof. But just as they thought the moment was secured, something shifted, a glance upward. The man from the SUV spotted movement. His expression sharpened. He nudged Miller and pointed. Incoming, Frank hissed. Miller's gaze snapped to the rooftop, and his face hardened into fury. He recognized them. He knew. In seconds, he was barking orders. His partners reached into the SUV and pulled out blunt weapons batons. Not guns, but still threatening. Chuck's instincts ignited. We move, he ordered. They scrambled across the rooftop toward the exit stairwell, but footsteps thundered somewhere below them. The criminals were fast, too fast. They reached ground level only to find two men blocking their path near the alleyway. The SUV roared closer, cutting off their escape from behind. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Chuck stepped forward, his body shifting into that state Lily had only seen in training, calm, unstoppable precision. One man lunged toward Frank first, swinging his baton wildly. Lily reacted instantly. While Chuck focused ahead, she pivoted behind the attacker and swept his leg with a sharp, practiced kick. He crashed to the pavement as Lily backed up, hands raised defensively just the way Chuck taught her. Protect your head, keep your distance, breathe. Frank stared, stunned. Kid's got moves. Chuck didn't respond, his attention locked on Miller, who approached with clenched fists, hatred blazing. You should have stayed quiet, Miller snarled. You and your little girl. Chuck didn't flinch. You should have done your job. Miller's punch came first, wild and full of ego. Chuck stepped aside effortlessly, redirecting the momentum with one open palm. Miller stumbled forward, off balance. Before he could recover, Chuck pivoted and guided him into a controlled takedown, pinning him against the alley wall without excessive force, without a single unnecessary strike. His voice remained level. It ends here. But the others weren't done. The second henchman charged Frank. Frank, though older and injured, swung his cane like a baton, striking the man across the knuckles and buying time for Lily to intervene again. She delivered a swift elbow to the attacker's stomach, less a strike of anger and more the trained reaction of someone defending another. She felt her bruised back cry out in protest, tears springing at the corners of her eyes. but she stayed standing. She would not fall again. Not tonight. Not in front of these men. Chuck heard sirens before he saw them. Tires screeched against asphalt. Police cruisers turned sharply into the alley. But these weren't Miller's hand-picked allies. These vehicles bore a different seal. Internal affairs. The lead officer stepped out, badge raised. "Officer Miller! Step away and drop your weapon!" Miller froze, dread dawning in his eyes. Chuck released him carefully and stepped back, letting the scene unfold. Miller turned just enough to see the blinking lights behind him and the phones flashing from civilians who had gathered near the street. Those photos and videos Lily captured earlier? Someone had anonymously uploaded them, and the internet had responded like wildfire. Within minutes, names, badges, and corrupt histories were trending for all the world to see. Miller's anger curdled into fear. "This is a setup," he sputtered. "He attacked us." The internal affairs officer waved him silent. "We have evidence," he said, voice sharp. "Multiple recordings, reports from your own colleagues, and a whole lot of eyes are watching." For the first time since they arrived in the city, Lily felt the weight of justice shift, even if barely, even if only for a moment. The officers read Miller his rights as they cuffed him with the same steel he had used against others. His glare found Chuck and Lily, burning with hatred, but beneath it was something he had never expected to feel. Defeat. Chuck placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. She leaned into him, exhaustion sweeping over her, now that the danger had passed. Frank limped to her side, pride shining faintly through the grime on his face. "You two just might change the city," he whispered. Chuck exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting to the rising sun behind the skyline. One small piece at a time. They walked out of the alley while officers continued their work behind them. Despite everything, the day wasn't finished. Lily had a competition to attend with bruises, with fatigue, but also with a heart that beat stronger than ever. As they approached the arena, Chuck glanced down at her. "You don't have to do this," he reminded her gently. Lily shook her head. "Yes, I do." Because this wasn't just a fight for medals anymore. It was a fight to show she could stand every time the world tried to make her fall. Chuck nodded, pride shining in his eyes. Inside the arena's roaring walls, the crowd cheered fighters who had no idea that one of the competitors had already survived a far greater battle. And Lily stepped toward the locker rooms with a warrior's resolve. She was going to win this day, not just for herself, but for the truth they refused to silence anymore. The noise of the arena washed over Lily the moment she stepped inside, a crashing wave of cheers, applause, and adrenaline that filled the air so thickly it felt alive. It pushed against her skin, vibrated through her bones, and for a moment she simply stood there and breathed it in. The scent of polished floors and chalk in the warm, bustling space grounded her. This was familiar. This she understood. In a world turned upside down by injustice and fear, here was a place where rules were clear, where strength was earned and not abused. Here she could fight back in the way she knew best. The locker room buzzed with activity athletes stretching, coaches speaking quietly, the rhythmic slap of tape being wrapped around wrists and ankles. Lily found an empty bench and set her bag down, trying not to wince as her bruised elbows scraped against the wood. Her father placed a hand on the bench beside her and crouched so he could look her in the eyes. "You don't have to prove anything to me," Chuck said softly. "Not today, not ever." Lily's fingers tightened around the hem of her sleeve. "But I want to prove something to myself," she answered. "Not just that I can fight, but that I can stand up even when I'm hurt. Even when someone tries to take everything away." Chuck studied her for a long moment. There was something in her eyes that reminded him of the woman he once loved, unyielding determination wrapped in warmth. He nodded. "Then I'll be right here, in your corner. Always." She smiled, small but strong, and began changing into her gear. The ache in her muscles flared as she stretched, reminding her of the fall down those hard concrete steps. She breathed through it. Pain was temporary. Courage, she hoped, would last longer. Chuck wrapped her hands with careful precision, his fingers steady, his expression intense. When he finished, he pressed his forehead gently to hers. "Whatever happens out there, you've already won more than most ever will." Lily swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. She stepped out toward the entrance to the arena floor, just as an announcer's booming voice declared her name. The crowd responded with curious applause. Some had heard whispers of the story that was already spreading online. Others simply sensed something electric in the air. Her opponent waited at the center mat, already bouncing lightly on her feet. An older girl, taller, more experienced, eyes sharp with competitiveness. Lily took her stance, jaw set, breath steady. Pain tugged at her spine and elbow, but she pushed it aside with every inhale. She wasn't fighting against her body. She was fighting with it, guiding it forward like a loyal friend she refused to abandon. The referee lowered his arm. The match began. Her opponent struck quickly, testing Lily's reactions. Lily blocked a jab and slipped sideways, her body protesting but obeying. She retaliated with a calculated strike to the ribs, sharp but controlled. Her opponent grunted and pressed forward harder. The pace quickened. The mat thumped beneath their feet as they pivoted, exchanged blows and circled for openings. Chuck watched from ringside, expression unreadable, but eyes fierce. Every time Lily staggered from a hit, his fists clenched at his sides. Every time she struck back with clean technique, he felt a surge of pride that warmed his chest. Minutes stretched long under the bright arena lights. Lily's lungs burned. Sweat stung the cuts on her skin. Her opponent landed a strong kick to her side right, where Lily's back still ached from the fall. The pain made her vision shimmer, threatening to drag her down. Her knee hit the mat for a second. The crowd gasped, sensing a shift. She heard Miller's voice in her memory, cruel, mocking, promising she'd regret speaking up, promising she'd fall. She refused to let those words define her. Lily pushed herself up, forcing air into her lungs like it was fuel. Her opponent advanced for the finishing strike, but Lily saw just enough between the pulses of pain. She pivoted and launched a counter clean, fast, perfect. Her fist met the exact point of imbalance, and her opponent stumbled. Lily followed through with a swift takedown that rolled seamlessly into a controlled hold. The referee was on them immediately. A whistle, a hand raised. Winner, Lily Norris. For a heartbeat, silence. And then the arena erupted. Lily remained on her knees for a moment, head bowed, chest rising and falling in rapid breaths. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to cry or laugh. Maybe both. She rose slowly, every injury reminding her it existed, but triumph overshadowed the pain. Chuck climbed onto the mat and caught her in a gentle embrace, holding her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. "You did it," he murmured. "Not because of your strength alone, but because of your heart." She closed her eyes and let herself lean into him. "We did it." The medal ceremony felt surreal. Cameras flashed. People chanted her name. Her photo was taken beside the mayor and event organizers, though she cared more about seeing Frank clapping proudly from the stand near Chuck than any official recognition. After the applause faded and the crowd thinned, Frank approached her and Chuck. He looked cleaner than before. Someone had given him new clothes and a shave. His veteran's medal still gleamed on his chest, but now he stood taller, no longer trying to disappear. "You changed my life," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I thought no one would ever believe me again. Now they're listening. They're giving me a place to stay. Someone from the department actually apologized to me." He shook his head with disbelief. "Didn't think I'd see that day." Lily smiled, her medal shining against her chest. "You helped us just as much," she reminded him. "You believed us." Frank chuckled softly. "Guess we all pulled each other out of the dark a bit." They stood together under the bright arena lights, 3 survivors of the same storm. Later, the police would confirm Miller's arrest and suspension pending trial. Internal Affairs opened multiple investigations after the public outcry. Officers who once looked the other way were now turning on each other as secrets leaked. Corruption didn't crumble overnight, but cracks had been carved deep enough to let light through. Chuck, Lily, and Frank stepped out into the open air outside the arena. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the city in gold. The same city that had welcomed them with menace now seemed strangely peaceful, watching them with something like respect. Lily touched her medal again and glanced up at Chuck. "I still can't believe all of that happened in just 2 days." Chuck slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes the world changes quickly," he said. "Sometimes it takes just one push." Her eyes flicked toward the descending steps near the subway entrance. She saw herself falling again, terrified and helpless. But now that memory had a different shape. It was no longer a symbol of weakness. It was proof that she stood up again, stronger. They walked forward, Frank falling into step beside them. The future was uncertain, but hope felt suddenly possible. Lily squeezed her father's hand. You know, I think Mom would have been proud. Chuck smiled, not with sadness, but with peace. She is, he said. So am I. The three of them continued down the sunlit sidewalk as the city hummed around them, a survivor, a hero, and a fighter who refused to stay down. Sometimes one fall is all it takes to reveal the strength to rise. And today, Justice had taken a step upward, just one step, but an important one, towards something better, towards something honest, towards something earned not by power, but by courage, toward a world where truth could climb every stair.